You ready?
Yeah. So you are listening to Dumpster Diving with
Janice
and Jane, and our special guest, Meredith, who I met through one of my coaching colleagues, JP Reynolds, who all of our 3 listeners know by through the episodes. But, we're growing from that 3 listeners. No, everybody loves JP. Everybody loves JP when we have him on. And you are his goddaughter, correct?
Correct. Yes. He is the OG godfather.
He is
calling him that from now on.
OG godfather.
That's what I call him now.
I love that so much. Oh my God.
Yes, that's so him. So tell us how, JP, obviously he's your godfather and has been since a very long time, I'm sure. So, but he was the one that was like, hey, you really need to talk to Meredith. She's doing some really great stuff and I'd love for you to meet with her. And so you and I met and I was like, hell yeah, you need to come on our podcast because this is cool stuff. So why don't you kind of give us your intro and who, what, when, where, why, and how, and kick us off.
Yeah, I love it. What a big question. Well, first off, shout out to Uncle JP. So I appreciate him. I feel like we're each other's #1 fan club. Like we're always like, oh, have you, oh, you should talk to JP. Oh, you should. So anyway, I'm happy to be here, and any recommendation or people that come to me through Uncle JP, I'm like, they're good people. But yeah, I've been busy.
Thanks.
I'm Meredith. I am a director, and I also own the video production company She TV Media, which is all about telling empowering and positive stories through commercials, documentaries, and narratives. And ultimately, this came out of my love for filmmaking back in the day. I thought initially I wanted to go into broadcast journalism. And I think I maybe mentioned this to you, Jane. But Oprah is and was my, idol, my model for what I wanted to, accomplish.
Amen.
Love it.
And she was like, hey, I started in broadcast journalism. And I'm like, okay, well, then that's the way to go. So I went to college with that, mentality of trying to follow in her footsteps, and realized and, knocked down doors and tried to do my best in communication studies and learning everything I could about asking questions, and that's my favorite thing to do. And then I worked at ABC7, and I did a lot of work in the news world, and I realized it was not for me. And in the process of that, I actually found documentaries, which was kind of a good combination of like the investigative, curious side of me, and also filmmaking. So that was cool. I never even thought of those two things. And back then, documentaries were not cool. They were not like everyone was making them.
Okay, I got to interrupt for a second, because a minute ago, Meredith, you said back in the day, and then just now you said back then. And for people who are just listening and not seeing, Meredith looks like she's about 12. So I'm struggling with the references, but that's okay. We're going to let you slide. I
appreciate the mercy. I appreciate it. That is very true. It's all relative, right? Everything is relative, but at least in my understanding, that was kind of the take on it. And I thought it was cool because there were so many different topics and ways that you could approach documentaries, and like mockumentaries, and you can kind of blur genres and talk about things that people don't normally talk about, that aren't in narratives or not in TV shows. And that was really exciting to me. So that was kind of like a turning point, I feel like, in terms of what I thought was possible post-grad.
Love that.
Nice.
So how long has She TV been up? Like, how long has it been in existence?
Just about 5 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yes, started out very small, obviously doing, kind of trying to find our way. Also, we started working with local businesses, women-owned businesses and entrepreneurs, just kind of getting our hands dirty and creating any kind of content that we could. And then we kind of expanded into nonprofits from there, and then larger entities and brands, building, bootstrapping, still bootstrapping, but that's kind of how we, started out, because it is very rare to have a predominantly female production crew, like even now.
That's amazing.
we're still a rarity, even though it might not feel like it.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. I mean, we're seeing more, more emphasis on women in general in terms of the industry, right? Like you said,
Right.
more women producing, executive producing, directing, doing all those kinds of things.
Totally.
But to have a company that's completely committed to this idea of, all women, all empowerment, et cetera, is, I mean, incredibly unusual.
Yeah. Thank you. I like to think that it's just a leveling of the playing field, almost like we're non-exclusive. We're just trying to take on a male dominated industry from a different perspective. And I think we need both, right? We
Yeah.
need both perspectives to really create new and interesting content and not just keep regurgitating,
That's right.
what we
Right.
have for the last century, right? Like,
If I see one more movie remade for the fourth time, I'm like going to just cry, because let's get out of that. Let's get out of it,
So many stories to be told, right? It doesn't have to be the
Yes.
same story over and over again. Although, we as consumers, we kind of drive that because we respond by buying the tickets and doing the things even over and over and over again, right? So it's a little bit of both, right?
But
So
it's also what are we being exposed to? And if we're
of
being
course.
exposed to the same things over and over again, of course we're going to buy it,
Yeah.
So
it's like if all of your options are chocolate, you're going to probably choose chocolate.
exactly.
I might.
So we need some variety. We need some, some fruit thrown in there or something,
Yeah.
So before we go too far down the road, Meredith, I want to just like dig for a second into the entrepreneur part of this, right? So you talked about like you did all the things that people tell you to do, right? You went to college, you got your degree, you just following Oprah's path into the broadcast in order to see if that would lead you to a similar place, if you will. And what I love about the story you just told us, as brief as it was, is that it really just shows that, first off, just do something, right? Move, take a step. And then there are going to be doors and opportunities that present themselves that you might not have been able to plan for or predict, right? So you really just kind of briefly showed how things can evolve once you actually start to take action. But it's a little bit daunting for people to think about that whole idea of entrepreneurship, right? Because it's not just about the fact that it's a mostly, if not all, female driven company that you started, but that you started a company, right? Tell us a little bit about like how you tackled that, if you will.
Yeah, that's a great question. I honestly think that a lot of naivete had to come into play here, because I think that I was so, like, in 2018, I was so delusional to the sense that like this doesn't exist and like why not me, that I was just like, I kind of just dove head first, right? And I was fortunate, to have my co-founder Natalie, who was like, yes, okay, let's do the dang thing. And I think that a lot of crazy idea can go a long way, but like the passion behind crazy ideas can also really, really carry you. And I have that at least to thank for my journey. I feel like I'm a filmmaker by trade, but like I'm a business owner by like necessity. Like I didn't, right? Like I didn't set out thinking like, yeah, let's run a company. Let's learn how to make proposals. Let's do budgets. Let's blah, 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 blah. But it's just kind of like, you kind of do that or don't create, right? So I was kind of like, okay, whatever I can learn like as I go. And I'm still obviously learning, like I'm nowhere near, it's always a journey. But I think in terms of like the entrepreneur side, it's like I'm a natural networker. So I did have that kind of going for me. I love talking to people. I like connecting. And I feel like as soon as I found the mission behind what I wanted to do, talking to people, it was easy, right? Because it's like I'm obviously very passionate about it. I can talk for days, like, and I want to work with other people that have that kind of mentality. So that kind of, I feel like, has been my saving grace, because it's not like I'm going out selling things or I'm pitching something that I don't inherently like want to exist. It's just kind of like everyone should be on board with this. Like we should all want, to see this diversity, to see what we don't see. And I think that is kind of like the underlining thing I keep going back to when I have to learn a new skill or I have to negotiate or I have to do something. I feel like I always fall back on like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And that kind of just makes the crappy parts better, because it's still in my opinion, like making a difference.
Well, I think that you're making a huge point, and this is something that comes up in coaching all the time, and I'm sure it does with Janice as well, with, you know, the lifestyle and fitness and stuff like that too, is you have to remember your why, because that's your driving force, that's your motivation. And if you don't have something that's going to motivate you to do things and get uncomfortable, then why are you even doing it? You know, so there's a different why question. So the fact that you naturally go back to that, obviously having the OG Godfather JP Reynolds probably helps a little bit with this.
Definitely helps.
Since he's a confidence coach, and you got him
Yeah.
in your back pocket, and
Totally.
so, but that is such a huge thing for somebody that, and I don't know how old you are, but you're definitely younger than Janice and I. At your age is such a huge gift that you have already, because it took me into my 30s, late 30s, to figure that shit out. So I'm excited for you, because you've already got some of those tools that is pushing you forward. So, it's just the beginning. It's so much fun.
Thank you. I want you as my alarm every morning. Yeah. That would be
that's where I can make more money. I could be a motivational alarm clock.
Oh my God.
Go, girl.
I love it. I love it.
Please trademark and market that.
I love that you said, you didn't know the business piece, right? You just kind of had to jump in and figure it out. And that's a whole other conversation, right? That we could dig into, because I feel like so many people are so daunted by that, this idea that, oh, I have to have this and this and this and this all lined up perfectly before I can kind of take the leap. And again, what your message seems to be is it's going to be muddy and it's going to be messy, but you have to jump in, right? If you don't jump in, never get there. Again, it's that idea of just do. So
you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, you do. And not only that, but having a good support system helps you make those moves, and a lot of small business owners or entrepreneurs, they jump into it and they learn as they go. Some of them get paralysis by analysis. It's not perfect. I can't do this, whatever. But even no matter how successful you are, they always need a coach. They always need somebody to help them have that sounding board and do those things, because you reveal so many different things. And the fact is that you too have a business coach as well, and so that just having that resource is so supportive and helpful. So, all you business owners out there, go get a coach, a good one that's going to sit and listen and help you with you first, and then your business, because that's where the work needs to start.
Such a great point. Such a great point. So tell us a little bit about, you mentioned as we were coming in, Scars Unseen, right? And so, you don't have to go right there if you would, but we'd love to hear a little bit about some of the work that you've done in the last 5 years that you feel like has been really either groundbreaking or important to your being able to kind of continue to develop the company, and then bring us into the current, which is your current project that you're really focused on.
Ooh, okay. I'm like, where do I start? I guess for me, there's been quite a few projects that I feel like I'm really, really proud of. Obviously, Scars Unseen, I think, is like the mecca so far for me and for this company, just in terms of like the amount of time and energy and resources and everything that we have put in. Like this project is probably as old as the company. Like this was one of the very first things we pitched to an incubator lab with Film Independent and Loyola Marymount University, and we were accepted into. And from there, it was a totally different story back then. It started as just as a series, and before then it was just a feature focused on one person, and now it is a feature based on 3 people. So we have evolved, like, format wise, a very long way from there. But I'll start with Scars Unseen because I'm already talking here.
Let's do it.
About it. But Scars Unseen is a triumph of the human spirit documentary following 3 women who have overcome domestic violence and are paying it forward. And this is a very, very relevant topic, I think, even more so than when I started, just because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It was like 1 in 4 women up until like 2018, 2019, and then now it's 1 in 3. And that exacerbated the problem because of COVID-19. And so do I wish this project existed when it was meant to come out 3 years ago? Yes, but do I think that it's probably an even better time now for it? Yeah. Like, I think now we're even in a more open-minded state to like receive and talk about this content, and to really start conversations and to, continue breaking the stigma around this topic of domestic violence.
So tell us
So,
a little bit then about, you said the format evolved, Meredith. So tell us a little bit about how that evolution happened. Did it happen because of the people, like ultimately the three women who came into the space, or how did the evolution happen?
yeah. So initially, we met our first interviewee, Trish, and we were going to just focus on her story. And through working with her and her nonprofit, we actually met our second interviewee. And then from there, through our crowdfunding campaign, we actually were contacted by our third interviewee who saw the crowdfunding campaign. I still have the most beautiful voicemail saved on my phone that she called and left this message and shared her story with us. And that was so cool because I just felt like it was all coming together, right? Like these women were coming forward, and these stories were like so different and so powerful on their own, but like together they kind of paint this larger picture and view of how different domestic violence is, and how many different layers and ways that this is an issue, because I think we only really get to see one version in terms of the content that's already out there, and it always focuses on the gory aspects and like the abuse details itself. And I feel like that does a very big disservice to the women and men involved in domestic violence situations, because there is so much hope out there, and there are so many resources for healing, and there is so much progress that these women specifically have made, that I was like, why are we focusing on that when we should be, yes, like we should be focusing on what can happen, and the other side, right? The living with trauma,
Right.
us as a society being trauma informed, like how can we do better, as opposed to harking on the negative.
Right. Well, it's crazy because right before we came on, I'm talking to my friend out in Wisconsin, and we were talking about this exactly because even though I come from domestic violence, from multiple situations of domestic violence, and it's not over when you're out of that person's energy. It's never over, because it's instilled inside of you, and I feel like the reason why people still talk about that is because it's never resolved. If you don't get help, don't resolve it yourself. So that's what they harp on. Well, you're not getting hurt anymore, or whatever, you chose to stay, whatever the case may be. But we're having a normal conversation, and something that was said, I had to I was like, okay, hold on. So when I said this, I was joking, but a little bit I wasn't, because it triggered me, and let me explain why. And he sat and listened and was like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, but it still stuck with me because it brought it all back up, and so, and it's something, just how I was treated when I was sick in an abusive relationship, and it didn't feel supportive. It didn't feel anything. And he was joking around and being like, oh, do this. And I was like, oh, that, yeah, no, no, I feel it all here. No, hold on, time out. But my responsibility is for him is to say that I don't like this, and this is why. So, this is a trigger for me. That's my responsibility. Now it's his responsibility to remember that, and then we could talk about it again or whatever if we need to, but it never stops. It's always there until you can fully resolve it. And I've obviously done a lot of work on myself and didn't get upset and said, well, you're just an asshole, I'm never going to talk to you again. I was like, you have no idea what you just said and how it affected me. So let me help you. It's so important for that. And that's why I feel like what your work that you're doing is so important, because it's the aftermath, it's the ripple effect, it's all of those things. We're away from the abusers now, those of us who have, done the things that we need to do. but it's never gone, you know, and so that's why your work is so important. And I just wanted to share that with you. So
thank you. I really appreciate you. And you are a powerhouse. And I think that you are doing the work that so many people like need and are, you know, yearning for also. And I feel like you just have taken this like upon yourself as well, just as a responsibility, almost like to educate and to change that conversation, right? To not just
absolutely.
keep sweeping things under the rug and shrugging it off. Like you're standing up for yourself every time that you do that.
Mhm.
And I think that when you stand up for yourself, you stand up for everyone.
Right. And I'm a true believer in doing it publicly as well, you know, not in a bad, negative way, because there's so many people that do that and they just talk out of the side of their neck and nobody listens. That's what they want. They want people to do that. But how we're doing it one person at a time and being so intentional with everything that we do and making sure that the message that we are conveying is exactly how we feel and how we want other people to feel. You know, people that just go out and go, oh, well, it's this because this is what the book says and blah, blah, blah. No, that's one person's version of it, you know, and that's not fair. So we have to do it through love and support and coaching and just time, you know, and it's not just throw money at a problem and keep shoveling the same shit down their throat and they'll just finally swallow it. No,
Right.
we're not doing that. Neither is She TV media. So
Meredith, what do you feel like as the story kind of unfolded and you ended up with these three women and their experiences? What do you feel like are some of the you know, kind of commonalities? Like, where do their stories intersect? Because I'm making an assumption that it's in part that intersection that really is a focus of what you're trying to accomplish with the project.
I think really the themes that came out pretty strong are that all of these women not only wanted to get out for themselves and to create a better life for themselves, but they all were like, how can I help the next person? How can I help one person? How can I change one person's day, one person's life, and like that just naturally came up in our conversations and our interviews and our things. And it was just like, each one of them said, if I can help one person. And I was like, that's amazing. Like, if that is the overarching feeling of these, you know, survivors, there's such power in that. And I feel like there's such like community in that as well. And that is kind of something that I was like, these are women doing amazing things. And not only are they doing amazing things for themselves, they're also paying it forward. You know, they're also looking to the next person behind them and saying, how can I bring you up, you know, with me? And I think that is a huge, huge theme. And also just like the strength of each of these women, I think is very beautiful and very obvious, because their stories are insane. They're heartbreaking. They're, you know, earth shattering to certain, you know, if I've been obviously inundated with this content for a very long time, but for someone who has never even thought twice about what this is, what this could look like, what this could feel like, you know, I don't really have words. I think that is why the triumph of the human spirit aspect is so huge. And I want to see more content like that. And I want to make more content like that, because it is there inherently, like as humans, right? So
That's right.
That's something that's so cool that I feel like we just kind of touch on. Like, it's not obviously the whole everything. We can't, in this whole document, we can't even touch on everything. We can't approach it from every single angle, but I think that is like my takeaway, and I hope other people's takeaways too.
That's so powerful. And I think that, you know, Meredith, listening to you talk, it's like you said, if you're somebody who nothing like this kind of trauma has ever been a part of your purview, right? Having people who can come forward and share both, like you said, what their story has been, but also importantly, to your point, Jane, not only the what happened before, but what is happening now, right? And how, like you said, they're striving to make the difference for one single person. And I, as I was doing just the brief reading, Meredith, that's on the website for She TV, one of the things that really struck me was your language around destigmatizing the idea of victimhood, right? And I feel like that has been, this idea of the stigma that does exist around victimhood has been one of the biggest levers that people who are inclined to violence, so the people who perpetrate domestic violence on others, this stigma around victimhood has been a major lever for them, right? Just knowing and understanding that people are hesitant to talk about it and are worried about what it will look like and what people will think. That's what they hide behind, right? It's absolutely what they hide behind. So talk to us a little bit about kind of that idea of destigmatizing victimhood and how you're approaching that through this documentary.
Yeah, that I think it's different for each person and for each interviewee's story in terms of how they view it. But in general, I'll say it's almost like, I think I have to check, but I think we include this in the film. But if not, one of our experts says, imagine a crime, any other crime, where the impetus is on the victim. And I think just that mentality as a society is what is keeping this victimhood, stereotype alive, right? Like, it's your fault.
Yeah.
Well,
And
if you think
just that belief, I feel like, is what is the biggest issue.
That's right.
Right. And it's like, how can we break that down? Why is that? Why? Like, what is the root of that?
Right.
Why?
Well, I think it goes back to our judicial system where it's, you're innocent until proven guilty, but we're going to throw your ass in jail and you're going to sit there and rot and whatever. Or, oh, you say you're innocent and all these people are saying you are, but it's that mentality of you did something to do this, to get here. So, and that really bothers me because, the whole aspect of, well, you need to not wear sexy clothes and you wouldn't have been manhandled, or you shouldn't have done this, or you shouldn't have done that. Hold on. The listeners are going to love that. I'm outside and I'm in the flight lane of my freaking airport over here. So I get the little personal planes that like sputter and stuff. So they get really, but it's that aspect of it's that fight for survival. So now I've been victimized, I've been assaulted, I've been all of these things. And now I have to prove that that's what happened.
Right.
And some people don't have that in them. They just don't. And so they roll over, sweep it under the rug and keep going. And that's where it compiles and people become okay with it because nobody was there to advocate for them or support them. And they didn't have a resource or whatever it is. And I think it's just how our society works. And so it's just like, oh, it's just easy just to go, well, prove it. And if you don't have the guts to prove it, then it just fuck you. That's where I think it comes from.
So I 100% agree with your perspective on the judicial system. No question about it. I feel like there's also some things that come before that. And what I mean by that is, like, it's daunting, like you said, right? If you have the courage to come forward, it's incredibly daunting to face the judicial system you just described, Jane. But there's also just the sheer shame, I feel.
Yes.
Like, as a result of being, right, in a victim.
Like this happened.
Regardless of what it was, right? Whatever happened to you. I feel like as a human being, some of our first feelings about those situations, and of course I'm speaking from my victimhood as a child, is shame, right?
Yeah.
Is guilt, is what did I do that might have caused this? What did I do that might have? And so right out of the gate, it's almost like, to your point, Meredith, we're the ones pointing the fingers to ourselves right out of the gate. Right. That's like a human response.
Right. I mean, I have a situation that happened to me in my 20s where, and I did not report this to the police because of that fear that I was going to lose my kids. I was roofied and raped and this close to being left out in the desert, and my survival skills kicked in and I got that person to bring me back to my friend's house, begging and pleading and doing all of those things, and got back to my house and with my kids. And I didn't report it because I was afraid that I would get my kids taken away from me. I was afraid because I let this happen. and so I've never reported that to the police ever. I had nightmares about that person for years, and I just lived with it because I was afraid, and now being twice the age, and I know so much better than that at this point, but it's those choices that we feel we have to make in those times of trauma, and so we need to normalize talking about it. We need to tell people that it's okay to share this, because that person's out hurting somebody else and somebody else and somebody else and somebody else,
Yeah.
and we have to be the ones to break those cycles and speak on that. So this work is so important, Meredith. It's so important. And, I just happen to be somebody that's been traumatized over and over and over in their life. And so, I can speak on that, but I'm also a well-rounded human being that can get shit done and do those things, fortunately. So,
Yeah.
But
But I think also
yeah.
to your point, that like speaks on these systems that are supposed to protect you, that are supposed to be there to support you. That is a whole re-traumatizing situation.
Experience. Yeah.
Right? Like that's also part of the issue, right? If you can get over the shame, if we as a society and a person can get through the first couple hurdles, right? Because there's so many, and then who do you turn to, right? Like who is it that's supposed to be there for you, that's supposed to protect you, that's supposed to invoke your legal rights? And if that system is not set up to approach you in a trauma-informed way,
Yeah,
it's going to end up probably keeping even more people from coming forward, which is I think it has been.
I think you're absolutely right. And a really quick example would be a young woman who I knew during her college years, and this is I'm going to call it a simple example. And what I mean by that is, to your point, Meredith, about how the systems can be broken because of the people who are in them, right? So she, was a young woman who came from a family where there was a lot of conversation before you go to college, especially as a young woman, right? All the different safety measures you have to be thinking about, all the different ways that you could be, things that you could do that could create a lack of safety, and avoiding all those. So all fully prepared, ready to go, etc. And had an incident one time at like I don't know that it was a frat, but like a party at a house or whatever. And took a drink from somebody she knew, and realized like within a very short period of time started to feel really sick. And so went outside and forced herself to throw up because she started to feel something really odd. And so long story short, she went to the ER that night because she was like, I'm pretty sure I was like, somebody put something in my drink. There's no question, right? And the response she got from the staff at the hospital was basically like, where have you been? Have you been drinking? The first question they asked was, have you been drinking? Well, yeah, she had been drinking. And when she answered yes to that question, that the rest of the questions were along the lines of, whatever this was your fault, right? Because if you've been drinking, really, you're just a drunk girl. You're another drunk college girl. And don't get me wrong, in college towns all over the country, I'm sure that the ER staff are like, oh my God, right? A dime a dozen.
Right.
On college girl who rolls in here. But it was completely chalked up to that. And she was so shamed and mortified from that. And the only question, like I said, was, have you been drinking? Yes. From that point forward, whatever happened was her fault based on the tone that she was. So fortunately, she had thrown up, she was fine. And it all ended up like as benign as it could have been. But can you imagine, right? As a 19, 20-year-old young woman, that's what she's carrying forward. So guess what? ERs aren't for her now a safe place. They're not a place to go. She's been victimized because she can't be guaranteed that the people there who are going to be the people who help her. Right.
Right.
Well, just the little things.
Yes. Well, I mean, the reason why I never went to the police was because of when I was a kid, I wasn't protected by the police. Yeah. My mother gets called. I have handprint bruises around my neck from her choking me and making me pass out, sitting on my chest, and she's 3 times bigger than me, and they're like, oh, this stuff happens. I have blood. I mean, and I'm like, they're like, go back inside. It's like, okay, I was attacked by my mother, and the cops are just like, just go back inside. And then, then the judicial system, when she went to the courts and lied and said I was doing all these bad things, and they take my kids away from me for 2 weeks until the court date, so in my 20s, I'm, this happens. I'm assaulted. I'm raped a couple of times, all this. I'm like, I am not saying a fucking word because I already know that they're not there for me. So I just need to shut my fucking mouth and thank God or whoever that I'm alive and just move on, and that's traumatized and survival mode that you just go into survival mode, and especially if you already have trauma after trauma after trauma. You compartmentalize, put that in a box, and you move on. But you can only do that so long before it takes over your whole world, and that's what I had to learn. It took over my whole world. I was a servant to trauma. That's all I was. I wasn't living life for me. I was living life for everybody else and what their problems were. And I just had to ignore mine. And it took a lot of work to work on all of that stuff. But again, for the millionth time, and I will continue to say it, that's why this is so important. So.
Well, and I want to, and I do want to acknowledge, right? Like we have we like to hope that they're extreme examples, right? We know there are a lot of good people out there in those roles who are working really hard, and a lot of hands that are tied because of regulations and the way things are written, et cetera. So Meredith, I'm wondering then about like, again, I just think this idea of destigmatizing victimhood is so critical. How do you feel like that comes through from the three women that you all focus on in the documentary?
I think that each of them kind of addresses what that means to them and how they've kind of internalized and in what way they have maybe felt like victims and how they don't want to be that, or how they've kind of like overcome that, or, seen in hindsight, those instances where they felt like their power was taken away from them, and then also talking about like how they kind of have reclaimed their power, which is amazing, and that's a huge thing, and I think just also by these women being so willing and so open to talk about this,
that's right,
in and of itself is helping, because there's so much power in a story, right? And having to recount their story and having to express this, but doing it because they know that, I think is huge. And I also think they inspire me over and over and over. And I think that there is so much power in them reclaiming their story and sharing their story, and hopefully to a larger audience as well. But even if so, to one person, right? Like going back to that, there is a ripple effect.
That's
I
right.
have to believe that, right? I have to believe that.
Absolutely. Well, and I will say, you said something when we first started too that really struck me, and that was the data around like, before COVID. I think you said it was 1 in 4 women and women and men, but and then after COVID, 1 in 3, because we know that people being locked down certainly translated to heightened violence, et cetera. And I think that the other kind of piece with that, though, and I'm curious about your perspective on this, is that I'm an educator by nature, right? And so one of the things that I see happening in the districts that we work with across, all over the place, is that there's so much more focus now on trauma. I feel like this idea of trauma informed is actually front and center now, right? Where people in schools, especially, which is where kids who experience trauma end up, every single day, every single kid, that there's a destigmatizing of victimhood happening right now from the perspective that there's such a focus on being trauma informed and recognizing the impact of trauma, regardless of, where the trauma stems from, et cetera. So I'm curious about like whether it's particular to this project or just kind of in general, your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think in the last, I would say, 3 years, I think that, okay, it's kind of like 2-part. It's like, one, we all knew that as a society, we had a lot of trauma that we were not dealing with before.
Exactly.
COVID-19 happens. We all experience another form of trauma on top of pre-existing trauma. Now we're trying to, everyone said, get back to a normal, which I think doesn't exist, but creating a new normal with all of those layers of trauma. And I think, for lack of better words, shit hit the fan. And we were confronted and forced to deal with a lot of things. And I think it's amazing that we have this idea of trauma-informed care, because as humans in every single sector of our lives, right? If legal, psychological, sociological, if we are all experiencing or have experienced varying levels of trauma, how can we function as a society without first addressing, or at least being aware and starting from that place.
That's
Right.
right.
Like starting from the acknowledgement, starting from this exists. I'm coming here. I acknowledge you, as you are, acknowledging me as I am, and go from there. And yeah, I think it's amazing that it's happening just in all of these sectors, because we need it. We need trauma-informed care in our schools. We need it in our hospitals. We need it in our legal system. We need it in every single area of life.
Right. When I think there's so many different types of trauma-informed care, because there's so many layers to it, right? There's historical trauma, there's current trauma, there's so many different things. There could be just hereditary trauma, within a family. And I have a very good friend of mine out in Georgia who, we've been friends for 13 years, and we have these conversations all the time, because he is a, middle-aged white male, and he, hears things, how people talk and stuff like that. And he's like, well, that should be over with, because, it's been 100 years. And I'm like, you don't get it at all, sir. And so I have to coach him. Like, it's exhausting for me to talk to my best friend sometimes, because I coach him. And I'm like, dude, I'm going to send you a fucking invoice. Okay. Like, it's crazy.
I'm billing you for these hours.
Yeah, this is why I love you, man, because you just tell me how it is. And I'm like, yeah, it's a lot sometimes, but I love you. I love you. So, but it's breaking down their shield, because they're tired of hearing certain things, or certain type of people says this, and I don't like that, because that was 100 years ago or 200 years ago. They didn't go through that bullshit. They still are going through it today, every day, all day. You are unaware of it because you live in your own little bubble, and that bubble consists of all your shields that you have, and all of the privilege that you have, and all of the other things that you have that these other people don't. And so if you don't seek to understand and then to be understood, you will never get it.
That's right.
And he's like, damn. But I'm like, you think you already know. Knowledge does not equal understanding at all. And so until you're actually able to shut your own brain up, drop all of the biases, and actually listen to the information that's coming to you from the source and with their energy, and not block it, you will never be able to do that. And that's why it is important, but it's important to speak their language too. I've sat through trauma-informed care that was so clinical and so cold. It was just like, well, this doesn't do shit.
Yeah.
You have to have real people that have experienced that trauma to talk about stories from their or bring stories. And there's so much power in storytelling. And this is why we're doing what we're doing, because people want to connect on that level. And if you're not speaking their language and doing it the way that they're going to understand, they're always going to miss the message. And so again, TV media, like getting the actual people, not just some fucking doctor that's sitting there and goes, this is how people react to this and blah, blah, blah. And this is how you should treat them. No, fuck that. I want to hear the story, and I want to hear the passion behind it and why you're doing it, because that's why that's going to move people.
And what I love about what you're describing, Meredith, is it's kind of the intersection of both, because you've referred to some of the experts and stuff that you guys have interviewed, and I couldn't agree more, Jane, right? Like, without that actual story and grabbing people by the heart, right? It's hard to have a big impact. Likewise, you've got the side of the brain, right, that says, but what's the data? What's the research? What's it? So I love that you guys are thinking about it across that way. So Scars Unseen, Meredith, give us is there a timeline in terms of when folks can expect to be able to actually see the documentary? Tell us a little bit about next steps for you guys.
Yes, big next steps. Going to have Picture Locked done with music by mid-October.
Nice.
I don't know when this is going to go live, so you can edit this part out if you need to.
No, keep them hanging on the edge of their seats.
Yeah, I know.
It's going to go live before then.
Okay.
After effect, yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
then we're going to basically go the festival circuit and submit to festivals at the same time as trying to secure larger distribution. And
Nice.
also we'll be working on an impact campaign to partner with organizations for some kind of partner events
Love that.
depending on like the release time as well, to really start putting this in places to start those conversations, or to act as a bit of a conversation opener, I guess,
Right.
you know, start it as a foundational point where you can build off of into a larger curriculum,
Love that.
maybe around trauma or around approaching domestic violence through the different lenses. And ultimately, I would really, really, really love to see this in universities and in educational sectors and advocacy groups to utilize as a tool.
Absolutely. That's
yeah.
pretty powerful. So that timeline is fantastic. And I'm wondering what you just made me think of. So I just a few weeks ago saw the movie Sound of Freedom, and what I really valued, I valued a lot about it, but certainly there's a really intentional call to action at the end. And it really ties nicely into this whole destigmatization of victimhood, because really at its core is talk about it, right? At its core is like, say these things that are so uncomfortable to say out loud, begin to be aware of your surroundings and recognize that, you know, if 1 in 3 women are, mostly women, but men, you know, are you know, victims of domestic violence, then that means that people sitting in my neighborhood right now, right around me in my immediate neighborhood, that's happening, right? So if you had to say, like, with what you just said in terms of what you hope, right, like eventually this becomes a learning tool that we see use in universities and with organizations, etc. What do you feel like if when I watch this, right, what do you feel like might be a call to action that you would hope that people like me, right, people like us, people who are just kind of watching from, you know, hopefully on Netflix, or who knows what the opportunity for mass distribution will be, but what do you hope we'll take away from it?
I hope a couple things, but I definitely hope that those watching, even if they've never experienced and this is their first encounter with this subject matter, that they do realize that you don't have to be personally affected to care and to get involved and to start conversations. Because I think that the more that we can have people who have not had this be so passionate and be so,
Yes,
we need to talk about this, this is not okay, I'm going to stand up for you because you don't deserve that, you deserve so much better. And if the tables were turned, I would hope the same for you, right? For me,
Right.
I really just want there to be, this is probably a huge goal, but I would love for people to watch and say, you know what, this does matter to me. Maybe this didn't happen to me, maybe it did happen to me, but I have a responsibility, or, you know, I at least can have the compassion and the wherewithal to understand that it's not going to get better unless we all care, unless we all start talking about it.
Embracing the we not me concept, right? The idea of really focusing on the we there. I love that. Yes, I want to echo, Jane said it many times, but this work is so important, and I just commend you for having the courage to take the step to start your own company, to focus it in the way that you're focusing in it, to really make sure it becomes a hub of empowering women and bringing the female lens to the view and all that you do, and certainly in this particular project. So is your website where people can go to see any of the things that you all have done so far? Is that the primary? Where do you want us to go to find you guys?
Yeah, the website shetvmedia.com or shetv.me is great. There's a also scarsunseen.com specifically for the documentary, also on Instagram, but our website has all of our previous work, so that's a good place to start.
I love that. That's awesome. So you know, Jane, final thoughts as we wrap up with Meredith?
You know, I think I said enough during this episode, but you know, I really appreciate the work that you're doing, Meredith, and thank you for, you know, joining us and bringing a fresh perspective to domestic violence, and, you know, being somebody that has not experienced it but is an advocate. I thank you, you know, because one of my favorite things to say is be the change you want to see, you know, and you are doing that work. So you know, I totally respect that and appreciate it. And, you know, and I wish you all the well and hope to have you back, you know, and on your next adventure.
When Meredith gets
Yeah.
really famous, she's going to come back. We
Yeah,
were
she'll
the
be like, I owe it
people
all to
who interviewed
you.
her when she was a
Yeah.
little
Yes,
person.
I will be
love
like,
it.
Jane and Janice are the ones.
I
You
love
know, we
it.
got,
Yes.
they set me up for
They're
success. No,
first.
I really
Probably.
do appreciate you giving me just an opportunity to talk about this and to talk about this project in my company. I think I love what you're doing, and I think the more of this, the better,
Amen.
right? So
Yes.
thank you,
Amen.
thank you for
I love
having
it.
me. I could do
Absolutely.
this every day with you.
I love it. Well, we'll be calling you. Thanks,
Oh
Meredith.
yeah, we'll be called. Yeah, thanks for offering that. Thanks.
Yeah, keep me on the slot, you know.
Yeah.
I love
Okay. Cool.
I love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and I think that's the end of our episode. So
That's
we
it,
will
everybody.
sign
Thanks for
off.
listening. As
Yep.
always, do all the things, share, like, subscribe, do all the things. And we're going to see you next time.
We will. Bye.
Thank you.